Jimmy Kimmel, he's very mad at me, and I know you're close to him.
I've heard that.
I hope you tell him that, I'm sorry that, they got bent out of shape. I don't think I did anything wrong. We can have disagreements.
I agree.
I mean, you and I don't agree on everything. Look at this clash now. And yet we're cool. Sometimes I am a little brash about me when they compare me with the other late night guys. And I'm like, I'm not like you guys. I'm not. You could all exchange your monologues, all of you, and no one would know the difference in tone. Okay?
Tone, yeah.
Whereas me, I'm not there. I'm not
agree.
in on I don't just buy into the left wing bullshit. And I never stop making fun of the right wing.
When Bill Maher fires shots at late night, people pay attention. And this time the target was Jimmy Kimmel and the broader world of political comedy. Maher didn't tiptoe around it. He suggested that late night hosts have drifted from satire into something more predictable and partisan, accusing them of applying standards selectively depending on who's in power. What made it juicier is a personal angle. He acknowledged that he and Kimmel were once close, but their relationship cooled as their political approaches diverged. According to Maher, he refused to follow what he sees as a late-night party line, and that tension created distance. The criticism goes beyond one friendship. Maher's larger argument is that political comedy works best when it punches in all directions. In his view, when hosts become too aligned with one side, the edge dulls. Satire turns into applause lines. Jokes become predictable. And once audiences can guess the punchline before it lands, the comedy loses its bite. Supporters say Maher is calling out hypocrisy and creative stagnation. Critics argue he's oversimplifying and ignoring the realities of audience expectations and media ecosystems. Either way, the clash highlights a bigger shift in late-night television, from broad, cross-partisan mockery to more ideologically defined lanes. Is Maher defending balance and comedic independence? Or is he just fueling another round of culture war sparring? That's the debate lighting up the internet right now.
That bugs me so much. My tribe is supposed to be the left, but these are the people who just can't talk to you unless you're exactly there. Whereas the Republicans, they always fucking come to my show. John Kennedy from Louisiana was on last week, took his beating like a man, like they all do. And we came across lovingly and smilingly and happily, and we can disagree.
I agree.
You and I aren't always completely on the same page, although we're very close because we're both smart guys. But, I just don't get...
Bill Maher has been unusually blunt about his frustration with what he sees happening inside his own political camp. His core complaint isn't simply about policy differences. It's about mindset. Maher argues that parts of the modern left have become insulated, surrounding themselves with like-minded voices and filtering out serious disagreement. In his view, that creates ideological bubbles where certain assumptions go unchallenged and familiar talking points get repeated without much scrutiny. He believes that kind of insulation feels comfortable, but it comes at a cost. When people rarely engage with opposing arguments, they don't sharpen their own. And when they finally encounter pushback outside their usual circles, the debate can turn reactive instead of reasoned. Maher sees that as a credibility problem. If a movement can't defend its ideas under pressure, he argues, it weakens its ability to persuade undecided voters. Importantly, his frustration seems less about abandoning progressive goals and more about how they're defended. He suggested that dismissing critics outright, or treating disagreement as moral failure, shuts down the kind of back and forth that healthy political discourse requires. In his view, that doesn't just stifle debate. It can ultimately harm the very cause its supporters are trying to advance. Whether people agree with him or not, Maher's warning is essentially this. If a political movement becomes too inward-looking, it risks losing both intellectual resilience and broader appeal. And in a polarized climate, that's a vulnerability with real consequences.
Shit at all.
Right.
And if that's not good enough for you, then I think you're the asshole. And I don't think Jimmy is an asshole.
No,
I think he's a great guy. And it bugs me that, because of what the latest thing was, that, we may never talk.
You guys should be thick as thieves and on the same page. And I'll tell you something interesting, talking about left and talking about right.
Even while criticizing Jimmy Kimmel, Bill Maher's tried to frame the disagreement as philosophical rather than personal. That's an important distinction. Maher's broader message isn't cut people off if they disagree. It's almost the opposite. He's argued that disagreement shouldn't automatically translate into exile or hostility. In a pluralistic society, uniformity of thought isn't realistic, and it's not healthy. Different life experiences produce different conclusions. That friction is part of how democracies function. Where he sees trouble is in the reflex to treat dissent as betrayal. When disagreement becomes grounds for moral condemnation instead of debate, conversation shuts down. People retreat further into ideological corners. Nuance disappears. And once that happens, persuasion becomes nearly impossible. You're no longer trying to convince someone. You're trying to defeat them. Maher's point, at least as he frames it, is that maturity means tolerating discomfort. It means being able to hear an opposing view without assuming bad faith. It means arguing ideas without erasing the person presenting them. And that extends beyond his dynamic with Kimmel. He's using that rift as a symbol of something larger, the cultural habit of turning political differences into personal ruptures. In his view, that mindset weakens public discourse and narrows the space for honest exchange. Respectful disagreement isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're confident enough in your position to let it be tested. Whether people agree with Maher's conclusions or not, that principle, that debate should be vigorous but not dehumanizing, is hard to dismiss. In a polarized climate, that might be the most provocative stance of all.
Rubber stamp. I mean,
well, maybe
you can't tell me that Congress.
I don't mean Congress. I mean like amongst the tastemakers, your sort of Tucker Carlsons, your Candace Owens, your Ben Shapiro's.
You're right. They're all over the map.
They're all battling
They're fighting each other.
Right. And on the left, everyone's sort of lockstep in terms of the tastemakers.
Right. Ben Shapiro, Yarmulke. Right. Tucker Carlson, Hitler.
Right.
Not so bad.
Right. So
what the fuck?
But all I'm saying is whether you agree or disagree.
Open disagreement isn't the same thing as a feud. When public figures clash over ideas, that's not necessarily dysfunction. That's debate. And debate friction, competing viewpoints. Those are core features of a democratic culture. Ideas are supposed to be tested. They're supposed to withstand scrutiny. That pressure is what refines them. The concern you're raising is about whether that same openness exists inside political movements themselves. It's true that in many political spaces, not just on the left, there can be pressure to stay aligned with the dominant tone of the moment. Social media amplifies that dynamic. The loudest or most uncompromising voices often set the temperature, and more moderate or dissenting voices may hesitate to push back publicly. Not always because they've changed their minds, but because the cost of speaking up can feel high. Reputational risk, online backlash, accusations of betrayal. That dynamic isn't unique to one side. The right has its own purity tests. Political tribes, in general, tend to reward loyalty and punish deviation. But your point echoes something Bill Maher has argued repeatedly. When internal disagreement becomes taboo, movements grow brittle. A healthy political coalition should be able to argue with itself. It should have space for moderates, radicals, pragmatists, idealists, all wrestling openly with strategy and values. When people feel they have to nod along rather than speak honestly, unity can start to look more like conformity, and conformity built on fear is unstable. The tricky part is separating two things, accountability and intimidation. Every movement has boundaries. Every ideology has lines it won't cross. The question is whether those lines are debated internally or enforced socially without discussion. Democracy doesn't suffocate only when opponents silence each other. It also weakens when allies stop challenging one another. Intellectual honesty requires the freedom to say, I'm on this team, but I disagree with that approach. Whether one agrees with Maher's broader critiques or not, the underlying principle holds weight. A movement confident in its ideas shouldn't be afraid of internal dissent. If disagreement feels dangerous, something deeper is going on. And that's not a left-only or right-only problem. It's a modern political problem.
Wasn't a good look for the woman party that all the guys were speaking out for Jimmy Kimmel when Trump went after him, except on the woman show. where for 5 days the outspoken hosts were suddenly as quiet as a geisha. Then on the 5th day, they rose and said, no one silences us. No one had to. You silenced yourself.
When Jimmy Kimmel faced backlash and a brief suspension tied to controversial on-air comments, the reaction across media was uneven. Some defended him, others criticized him, and some, notably voices Maher expected to weigh in, stayed quiet. That's where Bill Maher sharpened his critique. Maher pointed to hosts of The View, arguing that people who regularly speak about fairness, empathy, and protecting free expression were noticeably restrained when someone ideologically adjacent ran into trouble. In his framing, that silence wasn't neutral. It was strategic. It looked to him like risk avoidance. His broader argument isn't just about Kimmel. It's about consistency. If you defend free expression only when it protects your allies, but go quiet when the cost of speaking up might be social backlash, then the principle starts to look conditional. And once principles become conditional, audiences notice. They may not track every detail, but they pick up on patterns. To Maher, that selective defense fuels cynicism. It reinforces a perception that much of daytime and late-night political commentary isn't driven by universal values, but by audience calibration. Say what's safe, avoid what's costly, protect the brand. Of course, others would counter that context matters, that not every controversy demands a public defense, and that silence doesn't automatically equal hypocrisy. Media figures also weigh contracts, networks, advertisers, and platform dynamics. The incentives are complicated, but Maher's critique taps into a broader cultural frustration. People want consistency. If you're to frame yourself as a champion of open discourse, that commitment gets tested most when defending someone is uncomfortable. That tension between principle and pragmatism is at the heart of the debate, and it's part of why these clashes between media personalities resonate beyond the personalities themselves.
Continued, did you all really think we weren't going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel? No, I thought you would, but then you didn't. Five days? Talk about needing extra time to get ready. And if you can't take a breath and laugh at that, you're making my point.
I'll tighten this up while keeping the sharpness, but also make it more balanced and credible. The criticism Maher is making isn't really about labels. It's about consistency. Shows like The View often position themselves as moral commentators, weighing in passionately on accountability, rhetoric, and standards of conduct. And when the controversy involves figures on the right, the response is usually immediate and forceful. Panels light up. Language gets strong. The tone is urgent. Maher's argument is that the energy doesn't always match when the controversy hits closer to home. When someone ideologically aligned stumbles, the temperature drops, the spotlight dims, the urgency softens. From his perspective, that asymmetry is a problem. He's not saying they can't have opinions. He's saying that principles aren't supposed to switch on and off depending on who's under scrutiny. If accountability is the standard, it has to be applied consistently, even when it's uncomfortable. Now, defenders of the show would argue context matters. Not every controversy is equal. Not every situation demands the same response. Media outlets make editorial decisions every day about what to amplify and what to let pass. But Maher's broader frustration is about perception. When viewers see passionate outrage in one direction and caution in the other, it reinforces a belief that commentary is partisan first and principled second. And once audiences start believing that, trust erodes. The core issue isn't woke versus anti-woke. It's credibility. If you claim the moral high ground, you inherit the burden of applying your standards evenly. Otherwise, what looks like conviction starts to look like branding. That's the tension Maher keeps pressing on, not just with Kimmel, not just with The View, but with a wider ecosystem of political entertainment.
It's just an upbeat party show. That's why they hired people named Joy and Sunny and Whoopi. Girls, let me go out strong. Okay? It won't kill you. I promise. It's happened to me, and I may go out after this show. We don't know. We don't know. And, Jimmy, look, I don't think what he said was exactly right. I don't. We don't agree on that. He didn't lose his job.
Even in the clip people are debating, Bill Maher is actually defending Jimmy Kimmel in principle. That's what makes the moment interesting. It doesn't read like personal animosity. It reads like a line being drawn. Maher's position isn't Kimmel is the enemy. It's more, I'm not going to follow the same creative lane. He's argued that much of late night has become structurally predictable, especially during Trump era, with monologues heavily centered on anti-Trump and anti-MAGA punchlines. For many viewers, that approach feels cathartic. For others, it feels repetitive. Maher's discomfort seems less about the target and more about the pattern. He's long said satire works best when it punches in multiple directions, when it challenges hypocrisy wherever it finds it. In his framing, once comedy aligns too closely with one political tribe, it risks becoming applause line reinforcement instead of satire. That doesn't mean he's neutral in the sense of having no opinions. He clearly has them, but he appears to be resisting the idea that a late-night host must adopt a single ideological rhythm to stay culturally acceptable. In today's media climate, deviation from the dominant tone of your perceived side can be interpreted as disloyalty. Independence can be mistaken for betrayal. That tension is bigger than Maher or Kimmel. It reflects a broader shift in political entertainment. As audiences fragment and media brands become more ideologically defined, the pressure to stay within a lane increases. The reward structure, applause, virality, ratings, often favors consistency over cross-partisan critique. Maher's argument, whether people agree with it or not, is that comedy loses something when it becomes ritualized. If the punchline is predictable, the edge dulls. If certain targets are off limits while others are mandatory, satire becomes selective. And selective satire, in his view, stops being satire and starts looking like alignment. That's the divide he's highlighting, not friendship versus feud, but independence versus expectation.
Errand to try to say that these nuts who do these things are any team. Jimmy's wrong, I think, to put him in one team. But, look at what this guy is doing. I mean, Jimmy has every right to be wrong, but look at this guy. He was doing porn video games with furries. He was on a game called Furry Shades of Gay 3. This kid is in his basement with VR goggles on, getting virtually ass-fucked by a cartoon wombat? And you're going to put politics into this?
This is likely the moment when Kimmel and Ma truly began drifting apart. Ma didn't hesitate to call Kimmel out for turning everything into politics, and he made it clear he thought that approach was wrong, and he wasn't alone. Over the years, more and more late-night hosts have transformed their shows into political battlegrounds, using comedy less as entertainment and more as a weapon. The charm that once defined late night, the clever sketches, playful interviews, and lighthearted laughs, has faded. In its place, relentless political monologues, opinion-driven commentary, and predictable partisan spin on nearly every topic. Ma argues that this shift is eroding the very soul of the genre. Late night used to be a space to unwind, to laugh at life's absurdities, not to sit through a nightly ideological lecture. That's why Ma's criticism goes beyond Kimmel. He's challenging an entire trend that, in his view, is reshaping late-night comedy into something far less entertaining and far more divisive.
And finally, new rule, stop saying that Whoopi Goldberg getting yanked from The View right after she attacked me on The View is karma. There's no such thing as karma, sorry. Sorry, but life is random. The only word to describe it when a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions is hilarious. Now, I mentioned this karma stuff on the show last week because I was relating how many texts and emails I got from people congratulating me on receiving a karmagram from the universe in the form of Whoopi Goldberg's chastisement.
Ma wasn't pleased when Whoopi Goldberg was pulled off the air over comments many labeled inappropriate. Whatever she said, his stance stayed consistent. She had the right to say it without losing her job. That's classic Ma. He defends free expression, even when he disagrees with what's being said. To him, punishing speech, especially in comedy or commentary, sets a dangerous precedent. Criticizing someone's words is fair. Silencing them is not. That's the nuance many people miss. When Ma calls someone out, it doesn't mean he despises them. Disagreement isn't a declaration of war. So when he critiques Jimmy Kimmel, it's not personal animosity. It's a philosophical difference. They can disagree on politics, tone, or direction and still respect one another. Adults are capable of that. For Ma, that's the point. You don't cancel your friends. You debate them.
Goldberg shouldn't have to conform to or apologize for her views on race, as much as I disagree with them. And she certainly shouldn't have to sit out like a child and think about what she did. The View suspending someone for sharing a view is like firing Pat Sajak for selling a vowel.
America is a democracy, long seen as a global model for free expression. At its core is a right to speak, even when opinions are controversial, uncomfortable, or unpopular. Canceling someone just for sharing their view weakens that foundation. Disagreement is not a crime, and offense is not the same as harm. We already have systems to address speech that truly crosses legal or ethical lines. Courts, workplace policies, public debate, and accountability mechanisms. Those systems exist for a reason, and they should work without mobs deciding someone's fate. When cancellation becomes a default, we're not protecting democracy. We're replacing it with fear dressed up as virtue. Debate, challenge, counter, but don't silence. And that wraps up today's video. If you found this interesting, hit like, subscribe, and ring the notifications bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.